welcome back to another Cost Mentality podcast, episode 14, baby.
Let's go.
14 episodes with a few weeks missed, by the way. So I mean, we really be if we were consistent with every week, we'd probably have about 16 to 18 episodes, right around there.
We would probably be around there. Yeah.
So those of you who don't know, another Cost Mentality podcast is hosted by three absolute goons who met in the police academy, two of which are United States veterans. Thank you guys for your service. And one of which is just kind of, an existing human being.
Matthias just tongued the shit out of the microphone when you said that. I don't know why.
All three of us are fathers as well and husbands. So what we wanted to do is the three of us has helped each other through a lot of our own mental health struggles. And actually Angel over here decided, hey, we should bring this to light. We should make this a podcast and bring this so that other people, whether they're cops, military, husbands, wives, anybody would hear our podcast and say, hey, I'm not alone. There's other people that are dealing with the same type of issues or the same type of thoughts and things like that. So that's the basis of our podcast. If there's anything that's said during our podcast that brings up some feels, right? It's usually kind of how we say it, brings up some feels. Take a pause. Pause the episode. If you can't work through it, skip about 30 seconds, press play, see where we're at. If not, we don't mind. We understand. Sometimes these podcast episodes do get a little deep. They do maybe spark some feelings, maybe a little PTSD with some things, something that all three of us have dealt with, even on the podcast. So
we
don't be afraid
definitely
to
shed some tears here.
So today's episode, we actually have our two firsts. Our first phone podcast interview. Right? So it's just the three of us sitting at the bar. And our first professional interview, because none of us are professionals.
Professional.
And by professional, I'm talking about like a whole doctor.
A whole doctor.
Like somebody that went to school.
And believe it or not,
Like
came
us.
from my family, from nonetheless.
She took all the genes.
She is not a representation.
She took all the smart
She
genes.
said, you don't need this. I'm going to take that. So on the phone, we have my beautiful, intelligent cousin, Hillary Doctor, right? That's the new middle name.
Doctor.
Hillary Dr. Hayne.
Dr. Hayne.
Hillary.
Love it. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm super excited.
We are
Again,
excited.
listened to a few episodes, so I'm pumped to be a part of this. I think this is really great.
Thank you for taking some time out and speak to us. Like Chris said, you're the first professional that we're going to have on. We always state that we're not professionals. We're just here sharing our stories. But to have somebody that does this for a living and can possibly point us in the right direction and shed some lights on things that we can't shed some light on, it's great. So thank you for taking some time out of your day to speak to us.
Yeah. Hope it's helpful.
One thing I wanted to throw in before we kind of let Hillary introduce ourselves, she was actually one of the first people, along with you two, that I reached out to when I was having some issues. I was sitting in my basement alone. I'd reach out to her. I've always trusted her. And obviously knowing her background and her profession, I felt very comfortable knowing that, hey, there won't be any judgment or anything like that. And she definitely helped me along my journey to mental healing and habit healing and things of that nature. And I wanted to say thank you for always being there for me and guiding me, whether we were kids and making sure I did my homework, all the way up to me calling you in my basement because I was, crying or texting you and just saying, hey, I just need somebody to talk to. So thank you for always being there and taking the path that you took. I think you're great at it. I think you've helped a lot of people, and hopefully through this episode, there will be a lot of listeners that can understand that reaching out isn't a bad thing. It is something that can be nerve-wracking and scary, but ultimately it's a journey to healing. So if you would introduce yourself, kind of what your technical title is, how you got there, and we'll go from there.
Aw, well, thanks, Chris. I love you. I appreciate you. Always here for you. I'm Hillary again. I'm a clinical psychologist, which means that I got my doctorate, my PsyD, mostly focused in clinical hours rather than research. So I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of different people. I've worked in a lot of different settings. I've worked in outpatient therapy, in inpatient hospitals, in subacute rehabs and drug and alcohol clinics, a lot of different populations. But right now I'm working, again, in like subacute hospitals, people who are stepping down from amputations or illnesses or whatnot. So people are struggling with depression, anxiety, life changes, things as serious as bipolar, schizophrenia, trauma. And then I also have a private practice where usually working with young adults on anxiety, family conflict, transitions, all that good stuff. So a little bit of everything.
You're a jack of all trades.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. I have a question for you, and unfortunately, since you're not here present, I think you're going to get to know the voices of at least Angel and I. So
Matisse has already tried to air high five you twice, by the way.
Twice, because what you're doing is amazing work. Here's the question for you. After listening to some of our podcasts, did we make any fucking sense in anything we've said? If we were going to talk to somebody in reference to some of those physiological or psychological things we've said, like, you know, the things that we deal with some of the anxiety, right? Like the chest tightening and the butterflies or the intrusive thoughts. Like, are we making any sense when we tell people like how we feel, or do we need to go be one of your patients?
Probably definitely the patient route, but.
No, absolutely. Absolutely, you guys are making sense. I think that this is such a beautiful thing that you guys are doing, because the main point of, I don't know, therapy or mental health healing isn't necessarily just like sitting down across from a therapist and getting answers, right? Like, my goal is never to fix someone. It's to sit and give them just the space to understand and express themselves, is to figure out what works for you. And so as long as, and I know that you guys are speaking from that vulnerable place, that you're doing healing, you're doing good. So absolutely appreciate everything that you guys are doing. You make sense. You're doing well.
So when you said your job is not to fix somebody, your job is to literally sit there and let that individual figure out, like you said, what works for them. So you let them talk themselves into the answer.
Yeah. So as a professional, I, at least for myself, I try not to give you an answers, right? Teach a man to fish. But I'm going to help guide. I might, based on talking to that person, knowing what's important to them, what they value, how they've responded to things in the past, I might help guide by repeating certain things or asking certain questions to help them better understand themselves and the situation, see all the perspectives, and ultimately that person will come to what's going to be best for them. And sometimes it's going to be, you know what, I still want to eat 2 pieces of chocolate cake. And I'm like, hey, as long as we know the consequences of that, I am right behind you. So yeah, I'm not ever here to, I don't think any mental health professional is to degrade or, you know, tell you that you're doing something wrong. It's to give you a supportive place to understand yourself, to understand your patterns, to recognize those things, and then to be able to make choices based on your values, what's important to you.
When people have come to talk to you and kind of put everything out there and go full vulnerable with you, what are some of the challenges that they said they had that took them so long to come see you? You know, because I think that one of the things that we talk about is the fear of losing our job, the fear of being looked at in a specific way out in society, especially veterans. You know, I think we have such a bad culture with that, not asking for help, the ego, that alpha mentality. What are some of the things that your patients, is that the proper term?
Oh, yeah.
That your patients
clients.
would say, your clients, your patients.
Yeah,
clients. What would your clients say took them so long to come see you?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things. I think that one, people in some kind of essence feeling like they're not deserving, that, you know, I don't have some serious, quote unquote, serious mental health. So, it's not as bad as X, Y, and Z. It's not as bad as so-and-so's, or I'm not suicidal. So therefore I don't need treatment, or therefore it's not bad enough to get there. And so we're waiting until we reach this certain threshold, until we, are white knuckling it through life before you go and talk about those things. It's usually the point where, you've surpassed the point where you're able to tolerate it. So now we're having to work through a problem and then get to some of the reasons why those things are happening. So, this comparison or this feeling like I don't need it because it's not that bad. When in reality, I feel like mental health can be so broad and encompass so much. Just better ways to communicate, knowing, again, more about yourself, learning about transitions, learning just how to be a better version of what's important to you. Those are all very valuable things to talk about in mental health.
Which is so crazy, because when you have a car, you take a car in for regular maintenance. Your lawnmower, your weed whacker, your pool, the pool company come in, or you regularly throw in shock or salt or chlorine or whatever it is, right?
It's like yourself. You go get a physical every year, right?
Right.
At least you tried to.
Right. Everything else. But when it comes to our mental health, I feel like so often we're like, it's not that bad. I should suck it up. It's not that bad. I shouldn't feel this way. It's not that bad. Or, what I went through shouldn't be that bad, that traumatizing. Or, I can just deal with it. We let ourselves get to the breaking point. We let our car get to the point where our engine is so fried with so many problems. And then we're like, take it to the mechanic, go into the therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist and say, hey, this is what's wrong. Fix me in 30 seconds. Like, well, man, you've got years of shit we got to go through. Like, the mechanic is going, your whole engine's blown. It just, when you think of it that way, you're like, oh my God, like we suck at just trying to kind of deal with our own things. Like, we don't have to be this invincible person. I think where a lot of us think we have to be. And I think we're our own worst enemy with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That stigma that somehow it's not interconnected into everything, right? That you're going to stuff it down or bottle it up, and that somehow it's not going to come out in your reactions, in your relationships, in your physical health, right? Like there's so much research that connects how our mental health and bottling those things up, anxiety, depression, trauma, it comes out in our physical body. It comes out in headaches and stomach aches and indigestion and fatigue, trouble sleeping, all the rest of it. And it just is so cyclic. It just adds and adds and adds. And we end up like this shaken soda bottle that is just going to explode. So absolutely.
Love that. Can you do that one more time? Because I think a lot of people may kind of miss that because you went through it fantastically. But if you're kind of listening but not listening at the same time, your anxiety bottles up so much. It has physical effects on your body. And what were those physical effects that you touched on?
Oh, so some of them, the most common ones that I hear are headaches, migraines, right? That's going to be your most common. Stomach aches, indigestion, difficulty with different like bowel movements, right? Not to get too TMI, but like it does impact it. Trouble sleeping, reduced or increased appetite. So it comes out in all these different physical ways, acne, just all these different physical effects that can come up from bottling those things in.
The last 2 years, I'm almost like positive that everybody in this world is walking around with anxiety. Is that like a pretty bad statement to say, or is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I mean, anxiety is, I think that it gets demonized, honestly. So, and let me clarify, right? So, anxiety is a normal human emotion, right? Anxiety is supposed to be there. It comes from our old brain. It is meant to protect us. But because we don't have lions, tigers, bears, oh my, we don't have these things that our brain recognizes. And so it's looking for other threats. And those things come out as our kid's not going to bed on time. They come out as the traffic that we hit. They come out in the work that we do, right? So we're like misdirecting and this worry or this fear that we feel and attribute it to these things. So like, of course, we don't want anxiety to hinder us, but I think that as opposed to saying I shouldn't feel anxiety, I shouldn't feel depression, I like to tell people to use that emotion. What is that feeling telling me? And how do I make sense of that? So if I'm anxious, that's because it's important to me, right? I was nervous before I came in the podcast. I wanted to make sure I did a good job. Why? Because it's important to me to help people and to connect with people. If I'm feeling sad after a loss, that grief shows me how much I love and how deeply I care. Right? So like, maybe I don't want those things to go away. Maybe they help navigate me in this complex world that we live in. It's just another compass.
I think this episode is the most thought-provoking. The three of us are kind of sitting there. We're you can tell the three of us we're not joking. We're sitting here listening, but we're thinking of our own selves, how we portray all these things with us. But then, same thing you say, trying to help others with it. And I'm staring at Matthias and I'm staring at Angel, and everyone's in a deep thought of, shit, okay, well, that makes sense. Well, I wonder why this feels that way.
I mean, I think that we've done so much homework. All three of us have done so much homework in the last 10 years. Obviously, I think me a little bit more recent, but I would ask Angel, I would ask Chris, like, hey, is this normal? What do you feel? And they kind of like grinned at me, and I'm like, is this normal? Because being 35, almost 36 years old, you're like, well, I've never really experienced any of these things. So why now? And it seems like the more you get to like that midlife crisis or into your 40s or 50s, you start caring about life. I remember talking to my dad one time. My dad was like, well, it's 60 years old, like, and then some, because I think he's 63, 64, something like that. He says, it took me 60 years to be finally happy where I'm at. And my grandchildren are doing good. My children are doing good. I'm retired. My wife is doing good. And I'm not ready to die. And I'm not ready to leave this world. And I guess at some point, maybe he started really caring about his life. And this is somebody who's fought through cancer and a couple of different things, divorce and whatever else. And everything's finally good. And now he's got something to, really hold in a prized possession, his life. And a lot of people don't realize how quick life does pass by until you start, really slowing down.
Well, I think a lot of people start to realize how fragile everything is when they start to feel the scared emotions. Why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this way? What's going on with my physical body? Why are my shits not solid? Why are they liquid? Why are they, why am I eating less or eating more? Why do I have constant headaches? Why can't I sleep? I think for me, that was one of my big kickers was, what is going on with the doctors? I don't understand it. Why can't I sleep? Why can't my bowel movement so bad? So I think I agree with you, but I think that's kind of like when we first start to realize.
Hillary, I have a question for you. How long have you been practicing?
How long has it been? 5 years, I think.
How long have you been?
4 or 5 years I've been licensed.
Her whole life.
Her whole life.
Yeah. Her whole life. And the reason I asked that question is because I want to get another answer out of you. Since COVID, have you seen an uptick, I guess, in cases of, let's say, depression, anxiety, and whatnot? And prior to COVID, was it the same amount, or do you think after COVID it's been like an uptick in cases?
Yeah, I think that's a complicated question because I think that there's more openness and more acceptance, right? I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't have podcasts, at least that I was listening to, that talked about mental health. We didn't have such a big social media, right, market that was talking about and focusing on mental health and wellness and well-being. So I think that in some ways, maybe COVID was a catalyst. We were all alone with our thoughts for a really long time, really struggling through it. And so I think that it opened a lot of doors for people to start talking about it maybe and start reaching out a bit more. But it's always been there, right? I mean, mental health has always been there. I think that there's just more opportunity for conversation around it.
I have no doubt that it's been there because, again, I've mentioned prior, I had issues back in 2012. Not that I knew what it was back then. And then I had other issues in 2015. Both times I deployed and came back from a deployment. So it was deploying and coming back from a deployment, and then how I felt during the deployment, prior to the deployment, and after the deployment. Obviously, mental health stuff that I didn't know what it was back then. And I've mentioned here on the podcast that for me, there was an acceptance back then where you were able to talk about things freely, like you are able to speak about it today. Had I said anything about, let's say, mental health back in 2012, 2015, I probably wouldn't even be a police officer now because that probably would have been held against me. And not that I know this for a fact. I'm just saying it could have been held against me because it wasn't a thing that it was out in the open. nowadays people are more willing to talk about things, and it's more acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which, I mean, what a detriment, right? Mental health, so much shame can be tied to it, right? And shame is connected to isolation. It thrives in that space. And so here we were with a bunch of people being taught to not talk about this thing, to feel more shame about it, which, again, cyclical effect, created even more mental health. So yeah, I could see. Yeah.
I think that's the shame is probably the largest. Matthias mad at me. The largest one is, I know that's one of the things that kind of held me back, is I felt not just weak, but I felt like shameful of myself, like I was having these emotions, these feelings I wasn't able to control, how I was feeling, or that I let things get to the point where they were that bad, and it was almost acknowledging that, hey, this is the truth. And that self-acknowledgement is hard.
But it's also like even speaking to a therapist has become different, because if you think about how it was in the past, you have, like, let's say you look at a movie, when you see somebody speaking to a therapist, you see somebody laying on a couch and then a person sitting on the other end writing a bunch of notes. You get what I'm saying? So like in your head, you're like, what the hell are they writing? Like, are they saying something about?
Well, that's why a lot of people are actually doing those, like, what is it? Walk and talks. You know? But
that's what I'm saying. Like it was so wild back in the days when you think about what a therapist was back then compared to what it is now. Like you can literally Zoom somebody, you can have a phone conversation with somebody. There's so many different ways. You can actually text and talk to somebody. You don't have to. There's so many ways to speak to someone nowadays that weren't there before. And I'm wondering if that's probably the reason why people didn't do it as often before, because they didn't have all these avenues that they have now to speak to someone. It's so easily accessible to speak to someone nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably not as many practitioners, providers, probably not financially available to as many people.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of shame tied around it. So yeah, a lot of different factors, certainly. But yes, I'm never holding a pad and writing things down during any of my sessions.
But am I wrong? Am I wrong in saying that? Like when you look at a movie, that's what a therapist
it's almost like a negative connotation. Exactly. You're like, I don't want to fucking do it
because you don't know what they're writing.
Like, not honest, but
for all you know, they're judging you. Yeah, they're judging you for all you know. Like, listen to this fucking asshole and what he's complaining about.
Connotation. Wow,
that's an interesting thought, is what I would say to somebody.
That is a good word. That is gonna be the word of the podcast.
Tell me more about that thought.
My cousin comes on, I get smart.
You get smart, yeah. I see. Hey, I'm not judging you.
Hey, listen. The other day I don't
have a notepad on my head.
The other day I was writing something and I wrote, in my tenure, and somebody goes, "What is tenure?" Well, my time. But you got to sound fancy when you write these things down. People want to know your vocabulary is expanding throughout the years. In the Marine Corps, the police department, it's usually fuck, shit, fuck.
If anything, I digress.
Cheers to that.
So as you've gone through your time helping people, what do you think are people's biggest challenges as far as, we kind of just touched on it, but almost want to solidify it, to getting that help? Like what are the things, like somebody listening, if you could give them a message of, hey, even if they don't feel like they're on the border, but they've just gone through some things. Oh, I don't need help. What is it? Not that we're pushing for everybody to help, by the way. That's not, we've said that before. Like, not everyone's meant to go to therapy or talk or things like that. But what would be your, in that professional realm, what would be your way of kind of selling that to somebody? Like, hey, just having that conversation, if you don't think it is worth it, is, that routine maintenance, it's worth it.
Yeah, well, I think that first and foremost, anybody who was looking or feeling hesitant, I would encourage them to find the right person for them, right? Like now we have so many different therapists and providers. If you don't like one, I promise you will find somebody that is your vibe. You will find somebody. Yeah.
Well, you have mentioned that, Chris. You have mentioned that you've been through like 3 or 4 different ones, and you just haven't found the person, which is fine. I think I went through maybe 1 or 2. The first one just didn't show up to the first appointment. So when they reached out to me and go, hey, we can reschedule, I was like, hell no. That just the first impression to me was like, wait, we had an appointment today and you didn't show up. You think I'm going to reschedule? Are you out of your mind? So then I found a second one, and that's the person I've been talking to for the past 1.5 years.
Yep. A lot of different specialties. One of my friends goes to a therapist who's specializing in millennial moms. Like, it doesn't get more niche. It doesn't get more niche. So yeah, if you can't find somebody like millennial motherhood, if you can't find somebody, I promise you will find somebody. Just go through and try a bunch of them.
What the fuck does that even mean? Millennial motherhood.
That's amazing.
Different generations, different challenges that each generation faces. It's there's someone for everybody.
Which I think, when you say that different generations, one thing we have talked about on the podcast is that generational cycle breaking and things like that. So, I mean, we all laugh because we're like, what is it? But I mean, at the same point, I mean, I guess I get it. We're doing the same thing here. We're holding a podcast. Our generation is way different than the one before us, trying to help the one after us. So it's the same concept.
At least we're hoping that we are, because they might listen to us and be like, these people are out of their damn mind.
Somebody's sitting there drinking, just going, these guys are fucking idiots. And you're like,
We're hoping that we're doing the right thing, but hey, who knows?
No, I think this is all a good resource, which, again, I think there are other things. So if that person isn't ready, just like you guys were saying, I wouldn't push them to then go find a therapist, because they're already going to go into it with that mindset of closed off, I'm just not ready for it. So I might instead offer that person, I don't know, online groups or finding other social connections, or the self-help books these days. Again, find anything for anybody. Just dip your toe in, get a little taste of it, see how it feels, see what resonates, see what doesn't.
Just the whole thing, not the whole thing. Just dive right in.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few questions for you, and I'm guessing Chris is going to ask the first one, and we'll try to do rapid fire. If Chris wants to ask all the questions, that's fine.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you should be pretty well versed. Doesn't seem like there's anything too crazy here.
Which we kind of just really asked that first one. What advice would you give to someone who is struggling with mental health issues but doesn't know where to turn for help?
Yeah, which I think we kind of just talked about, right? So obviously there are a lot of different therapists, a lot of different ways to connect, which is lovely. A lot of different big platforms that offer discounts if finances are a concern for you. Texting if you need a little bit of distance in that relationship to start with. But again, a lot of just free resources on the internet and in books and in your relationship. So any small actions that you can take can make a big difference.
For texting and calls, rates may apply.
But I found that to be the most
standard rates.
Getting into it, especially you're mentally vulnerable. I found that the ability to find my first therapist, which again didn't work, just somebody to talk to via text and doing it through Skype, I was much more able to feel comfortable enough to take that leap. I was in the comfort of my home on my time. I didn't have to drive out. I didn't get that anxiety driving. Signing in, doing all that stuff was obviously a little nerve-wracking. But I felt the best being able to do that. Now with the financial part, I know this is something that a lot of people struggle with. Oh, I can't afford it. Oh, it's going to cost X amount. What services do you know? And I know everywhere may be different, right? And certain services may work for others and not. Which
different states have different resources,
right? But the resources that that are available, or finding that physical assistance, how can you better guide somebody to look for that?
Yeah, so the first thing I always say is if someone has insurance, to call their insurance company. They'll give you a list of providers in your area who are credentialed with your insurance. But other resources, colleges have a lot of students who are coming up. I mean, even if you're going to like my school, Immaculata, you're going to people who are training to get their doctorate. So they have their master's. A lot of them have had some time in the field. So it's not like you're getting a bad provider by any means, but because they're still in school or working to get their doctorate, you might get them for a better rate.
Well, when they're doing their clinicals, right? That's what you mean? Like, okay.
Yeah, or even going into the school itself. Yep. So a lot of the times you can get testing done through the colleges, or again, get individual sessions through the colleges for a discount. And a lot of the big companies, although I I don't love them. I think that they are good to start out with, and again, give great discounts for those services. So you get to put your income in. I think you can wiggle it a little bit off the record, and you can get discounts for those. So, you can end up paying little to nothing for them. Again, just to dip your toe in the water.
Okay.
Yeah, those would be some of the places that I would first look.
Awesome. All right. What is the biggest misconception about mental health that you would like to dispel?
Again, I feel like we kind of got into this one with the piece about people feeling like they don't deserve mental health. And I think that I thought this question too, like, what do I hear most often? Which are, again, are the people who are saying they don't deserve it, but even additionally, their expectations around the therapy process, that, there's a lot of fear of what's this person going to think, or what are they going to say? What are we going to talk about? Are they going to tell me X, Y, or Z? Are they going to judge me for X, Y, or Z? And they're not. It's not this miraculous thing. It's not this magical person. They are just another human being who is trained to pause and listen and to hear you. And sure, they have a bunch of skills in their toolbox that they can help you learn. But again, it's a space to talk and to learn about yourself. So there's no wrong thing you're going to say. There's no wrong reason to get into a therapist's office. It's just a space to explore those patterns and to learn more about yourself. And I think too,
and like you said earlier, you kind of guide the conversation in a way where the person feels comfortable in finding their own answers. Obviously, being guided by a professional, somebody that knows what they're talking about. Because I can help somebody, I can listen to somebody just like you can, right? But can I give them professional advice, and can I professionally guide them into a place where I feel comfortable that they know what they're doing and what their next move is going to be? You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And can you be consistently present for them in that way? And there's something special about that therapeutic relationship that I'm not going to say, well, this happened to me and this is how I did it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to continue to come from that place of a blank slate. So you get to make me into the person that you need me to be to process that.
Yeah.
You get to use that space however you need it to be used. So there is something beautiful about that relationship and unique about that relationship that allows somebody to feel safe, feel vulnerable. And again, you have all those confidentiality laws. So none of it's getting shared.
Oh, that's awesome.
Can I ask you just a question too? Because I think it takes a special person. Well, because it's on that, so I don't want you to go to the next question and go to a different thought.
No, he always gives you the same answer. No matter what you do, he's just going to give you the same answer, which is why I laugh.
Matthias got a question, and he just jumped right in. Okay, go ahead, do your thing. It's not like I didn't say I was going to ask it, but do your thing, bro. Do Matthias things.
It's a Matthias thing.
It is a Matthias.
Because you know what? My mind's going to go somewhere else and I'm going to forget the question. Maybe I need to start writing it down.
I do it all the time.
Christmas is right around the corner. Maybe I need a notepad.
I got you. I need
a notepad to ask questions.
I'll get you a Hello Kitty notepad.
I'll take it. I'll write the hell on that fucking Hello Kitty thing. Hillary, it takes a special person to do this job. Like, what really got you into that?
She's got a stupid ass cousin. That's what we got into it.
It's mostly family members usually.
Gosh, so sure, it's probably a mixture of a lot of things, but I think the first point that I usually note to people is I've always loved being able to help other people, to be able to be present, to be able to be there for them. And then my junior year, I took a sociology class and we learned all about serial killers and all the rest of it. And I was just fascinated with how the brain works and the different presentations and the different ways that people thought. And so I think the two just blended to each other and ended up finding myself in therapy.
That's actually a pretty good answer, because usually people say, I just want to help people.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like the generic.
Which is like when we get police officers that come in. All right, man, why'd you become a cop? Oh, I want to help my community. I'm like, yeah, okay. Why'd you really become a cop? Like, what are the actual reasons you did this job?
No, same with the military, because I've been doing a lot of reading, which I really appreciate that part of the recovery process.
Harry Potter.
What's that?
I read Harry Potter.
Harry Potter's great. Don't shit on it.
Wonderful.
Love it.
I think that sometimes you take it easy. Put that wand somewhere else.
Good thing we don't have a live stream going.
I know. I think that a lot of people that are in therapy that I've spoken to, they said that there was a time in their career where, they had to sit down with a therapist as well. You're listening to so much secondary trauma stuff. Like how does that work? Like you become a therapist and you're listening to people's problems. Has there ever been a time where you're just sitting here and you're like, oh man, I got to talk to somebody after hearing that?
Every day. I mean, yeah, it's a hard job, and there's a piece of that you learn as a therapist of balancing that, of creating boundaries, that this isn't my emotion to carry, this is this person's, and I can appreciate and I can empathize with it, but it's not mine. There's a piece of building a big support network. So I have so many friends that are psychologists, and we get together and we call each other regularly. We check in regularly. We send memes to each other to laugh about things, right? Humor is so important in balancing our mental health. My husband, who is also in the mental health field, and I have so many people that I get to talk to, and more importantly, using all the things that I preach to other people. So, we build this world that is so distant from who human beings have been and how we've evolved, right? We used to work in groups and eat natural foods and go to bed when it got dark. And now we can live on the 12th floor and not see a tree and talk on a Zoom call and not see another human being. So doing all of those things, right? So doing all of these things that help reconnect me to my humanness, walking in the grass, spending time with my dog and seeing her joy, going for a walk, doing all of these things to take care of myself, to make sure that I can be present for the next person that walks through the door.
So, one of the things that you had said is your ability to not carry, the things that your clients are going through, their emotions, and putting that on you. I think that's one of the things that police officers, we almost struggle with very often, is we get attached. We see these things and we deal with these emotions, we deal with these calls, and we almost put ourselves in that person's shoes. We're like, that person is having this issue. I have felt similar. I must be like them. And I think that's almost where we struggle in our worst enemy. And then I think also in the same realm where you openly said it, and I love it, that I have other friends in the same profession and we talk to each other about it. We joke, we send memes. I think cops were like, oh man, we get together, we don't want to talk about work. And then we talk about work. But I tell our new guys and my buddies that when we hold get-togethers at the house, it always turns into a giant gripe fest and talk, and I love it. And I say all the time, I go, this is what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a session where everyone can, air out something, whether it's on the job or even we've had it with other individuals, like, hey man, why do you do this? And but it's all in a good, and I hate the term, but a safe environment where you can have those conversations and you can joke and you can talk about your traumas. And I think police need to, and especially military and even fathers need to do that more often, where you can go to somebody else in that same field or that same position, be vulnerable, and not feel like, oh, same thing. Well, I shouldn't talk about this. I shouldn't joke. I should just let this go.
I think it also comes down to having a good support system. And then our motto, obviously, to talk about it, right? So it's not just having the support system, but it's being able to talk about it. Like when you're going through something or when you heard something or when you saw something, and then you feel comfortable, let's say reaching out to Chris or reaching out to Matthias. Hey guys, this is what I experienced today. It has me feeling a little weird. Just, needed to talk about it with somebody. So it comes down to having that support system, but also being able to use that support system and knowing that it's there when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that support system, knowing you well enough to know when it's time to be silent, when it's time to let that person take the space, when it's time to make a joke, having those people who really know you, know what you need, know kind of what you've been going through. It's invaluable. Absolutely.
All right, and that actually great segue for the next question.
It's a family trait. It's a family trait.
What can friends and loved ones do to support someone who is struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, I liked this one.
Right, that was a great segue.
That was a very good segue.
Beautiful.
I gave you a clap. Did you hear the clap?
Yeah, I heard the clap. Can you give me the hype button? There you go. There we go.
So professional.
The hype is real.
We're just here to talk about it.
Very professional. Yeah, I think that it's never as complicated, but it's hard, right? So as loved ones, we can so easily fall into the realm of, I want to fix this, I want to make it better, and you've already lost the nuance of that person and what they're going through in their experience. So being present, listening, giving them the space, asking them what they need, and following up on those things. I feel like, and maybe you guys too, as people who have gone through, all of us have been through mental health. I think the stat is 80% of the population will have a depressive episode in their lifetime. So, again, it's not.
That's
unique,
a lot of people.
What's our statistic?
80%.
Say again?
What's our statistic? Do you remember? The amount of like trauma experiencing things that we go through?
I don't remember the statistic, or
the number.
I don't remember the number either. I just know that they say that it's extremely high and that police officers this. And I'll be honest with you, that I know that Chris was talking about some of the stuff we take home with us and how we get so attached to other people's problems. One of the biggest thoughts, because I started going to cognitive behavior therapy, right? CBT, and
I can't wait to talk about that though,
dude.
Because that's one of the things I think is like the hardest, because people don't want to, because it's putting you in that uncomfortable position to do that, right?
Is it weird?
You're gonna have to go through this, and you're like, I don't want to do that.
I loved it. I was happy to start therapy, and I was happy to start talking to somebody about, how to bettering myself. Because, it's not like you're doing anything wrong. It's just that it's something that comes with you, right? Like I know Hillary said, it's normal for these things that come up throughout time, especially whether it's a generational shift or a traumatic moment in your life or whatever. But for me, I think that one of the biggest things that bother me, right? Because they say thoughts are something that kind of start up that whole anxiety thing. My thought process is always like, oh, I'm having anxiety, I must be one of these guys who took their own lives, or I had some sort of sadness or depressive moment or whatever. That person also had these things, so that's probably why somebody took their life.
But that's what I'm saying. I think we associate ourselves because we get our PMIs and stuff like that all the time, and we'll bring them into our local short-term psychiatric intake, and for us, it's like, oh, if I have anything that's like that, I must be like this person, and we know what that person's like. And I think that's our own. We don't want to be associated with it, but we're almost like scared. Like, what if that's true? What if? And that's an anxiety. That anxiety of that's
your shadow self. Right. So we call that like a shadow self. So that's a version of ourselves that I'm not, right? I'm not a murderer. I mean, technically we step on ants. So like, have we taken a life? Sure, technically. So, but there's this feeling of like, I'm not that. And so we fight so hard to not be it that it can end up kind of like consuming us inside, that piece that is there, and that is okay, because we're complex, we're human beings, we're multifaceted. So to say I'm not that, you're doing yourself a disservice in exploring that part of you that does exist. And it doesn't mean that we jump to conclusions and say that I'm like that person, because you're not. We're all unique and individual, and everybody experiences everything differently. But it does allow you to explore that space and to say, okay, if I'm feeling some kind of similarity to what this person is going through, maybe that's important for me to look at and say, okay, I'm empathizing with that. I can see how scary that would be, and give myself compassion and say, I want to make sure that I take care of myself. So how can I do that for myself today?
So I was just about to ask, what's the best way to deal with your shadow self so you don't spin yourself around in that tailspin? You really, the last 3 sentences, you answered that.
Yeah, so my focus, everybody has different focuses, clinical focuses. I'm an acceptance commitment based therapist, as well as a self-compassion. So those are going to be the two things that I mostly talk with people about. So to just break it down, being able to, like I had said earlier, look at that emotion, and instead of trying to challenge and get rid of it, which has its time and place, is to utilize it to say, okay, why is this coming up? How might this be important to me? And how do I use it to to motivate me or to change or to grow or whatever that emotion is trying to tell you, and to do it compassionately. So would you say half the things that you say to yourself to another person, the answer is always no.
Yeah,
you would never talk to another person like that. So why would we ever talk to ourselves that way? And bullying yourself has never worked. So why keep doing it?
I think this is my favorite episode so far. Is because this is one
not that he's biased at all, you know.
Well, it's because there's a professional giving us like some legit
insight,
just like we've been talking about.
As opposed to three idiots just talking to talk.
But I think for that reason, we all struggle with, why do I have these thoughts? How do I deal with them? And you're really giving us the first hand, and essentially free, because I pay you in, love. That's pretty much
in
it.
love.
We love you too, Hillary.
The free portion of it was like, this is the best way to start that. And obviously, like, this isn't the end all be all with a lot of these things, but to start the positive mental healing is what you just told us, is to go. I call it acceptance. It doesn't you have to accept these things, but it's just accepting the thought, and like you said, understanding the thought and kind of just talking yourself to it versus wanting to fight it. And I think that's wanting to fight it is almost everyone's natural reaction, is wanting to fight because it's uncomfortable. It's not me. Why am I having that? I don't want to be that. I don't want to think that way. I don't want to believe this. Is this who I am? And then again, it just sends you into this deep dive tailspin. Where having what you said and just kind of stopping yourself and going, it's not me, but I can understand where this person comes from. I understand that thought. I understand this process is it's a great mental healing.
You're distinguishing between what I'll call a chimp brain or a monkey mind versus your human mind versus your computer, right? So your
monkey
chimp
mind. That's Jay Shetty. That's Jay Shetty.
Hey, so I mean, it's there to protect you. It's there to meet all of your drives, to keep you and the species alive. It's there for survival, and it's there to be aware of all of those vulnerabilities. It's going to be your first line with anxiety, fear, depression, all of those emotional thoughts, because it wants to keep you safe, and it's going to win out against the human every single time, which the human brain is more like fulfillment and social harmony, perspective, all of those things. So instead of trying to fight this very automatic and deep old part of our brain, instead, can we recognize it? Can we understand it? Can we nurture it? Because that's what's going to, can we reward it? Can we do those things that you would, like, again, you would do with a child, right? There's that talking to your child self, all that good stuff that, again, I would do with a professional, but all those good things to keep in mind as you're trying to navigate all of it.
I love it. So one of the next questions is, what are the simplest approaches to improving mental well-being? And I feel like you almost touched on it there as well. Like, we kind of ask these questions after you've already answered it. But one of the simple approaches is just being kind to yourself and understanding, not critiquing yourself, and understanding that shadow self, or that, what did you call it? The monkey brain?
Monkey mind.
Monkey mind.
And we've always said, like, let's say me as your friend, if I see that you're struggling and I tell you that you're struggling, unless you recognize that you're struggling, you're not gonna do anything about it. You need to accept it first. It's self-acceptance, and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Even too, I don't mean to say things that people have already said, but they say them for a reason. Just like we were talking about earlier, your mental health isn't this individual existence. It's so deeply connected to everything else. So what we were talking about earlier with, like, getting regular sleep, eating a balanced diet, consuming less news, consuming less social media, finding and doing things that you love, connecting with loved ones, going for a walk, going outside. We spend, I think I love podcasts too, less than like an hour outside every day. I mean, your body needs that. It needs those rhythms. It needs the light rhythms. It needs those things.
Did you say you have a podcast too?
What?
Did you say you have a podcast as well?
No, I listen to other podcasts.
Oh, I was like, why have you not told me this? Why is this not something that we've talked about?
You're about to get free promo over here. We do have some listeners,
You're soft. Real soft.
No, I'll save it just for you guys.
All right. What is the primary objective of cognitive behavioral therapy.
At least do you have any
Matthias's
background?
eyes just lit up. So Matthias isn't going to shut up for the next 10 minutes because that's about what we left. So he's going to dive in with you.
I'm just listening, man.
You guys will have to manage me because I used to teach an 8-week 16-class course on this. So I could talk about this for hours.
Go ahead.
So is this available? Is this training available?
Yep, dive into it.
Yeah. So
go as deep as you want. Remember, we told you that as deep as you want.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that
sleepy.
I want to make sure that it's also, consumable, right? If you talk too much, your brain can't process over, I think it's an hour and a half worth of information. So, I'll keep that in mind too.
We keep usually most episodes we keep to like an hour 15.
No wonder people don't remember anything I said.
I mean, you've been talking your whole life, so
talk about it.
All right, good to
So CBT, basically you're trying to get a better understanding of your thoughts and feelings and how those things impact your behavior, right? So oftentimes someone thinks X happened and then I reacted. So someone said this, I punched them in the face, right? Someone flipped me off, I rear-ended them, right?
Sounds like me.
But there's so much that's happening in between that a lot of us don't even recognize. And this was one of the examples that I would tell in my class. My dog, Poppy Seed, when I first got her, I really had these grandiose ideas. I was going to be the best dog trainer, the best dog parent. I was really going to do it great. And one of the things that I was going to instate was that she wasn't going to be allowed on the furniture. Very lost cause, but it was
like
a goal.
Every dog parent, you're not going to be on. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, now she owns them. But anyway, so I've been training her. I've been doing different reinforcement behavioral methods. I'm a psychologist. I should nail this. And I come home and she's sleeping on the couch. And the first thing I think is, she's on the couch again. I can't believe this. She's never going to learn, this dog. Why did I think that I could do this? Right. And then those thoughts are contributing to feelings that are coming up. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling upset. I'm feeling disheartened. I'm feeling, maybe self-conscious. I don't know. But as I pause and I zoom out, I notice that Poppy Seed is shaking. And as I zoom out again, I see that she's scared because there's a thunder and lightning storm going on. And now I'm having the thought that, oh my gosh, this poor dog. I can't believe that she's so frightened. How can I comfort her? I love her. I want to help her. What does she need? And I'm having feelings of empathy and compassion and love and kindness, all with the same situation. Poppy Seed is still on the couch, but based on my thoughts and feelings, I respond to that differently. So
it's almost like having kids, because I know one of the things that I've worked on strongly is, and my wife loves to point this out, not in a bad way, but just trying to understand, and this is that generational cycle breaking. So your kid does something wrong, or they're acting out, or they're crying. Instead of yelling, "Why are you crying? Get over it." It's, all right, why are they crying? Well, they lost a toy, or they didn't get what they want. Okay, well, what does this mean for that child? That is the biggest thing in the world to them. Or they may just want the attention because they've just missed you. And though you're overwhelmed and you're snapping because you're overwhelmed, you just want 2 minutes. To that child, well, all they want is you. Or all they want is that toy, because that's just how they know how to find their happiness, is that, finding that toy or playing with something. Or So, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. As you think about that situation differently, it's no longer that my kid is crying because they don't have the toy. It's, wow, this is the biggest thing to happen in their life, in their day to this point. This is upsetting. How can I help them navigate that feeling? Or I've been gone all day. They miss me. They don't have the language to communicate that to me. So how can I help them navigate how they're feeling and what might be a better way to express that, or a way to comfort that by modeling that to them? Absolutely. But it's all how you think about it. And that's how you're going to respond to it. And as you do these things, you'll notice certain thoughts come up more than others. So maybe as I'm doing this thought work and I'm taking more notice of the thoughts that are coming up, I'm noticing that the thought that I'm lazy comes up a lot. That I'll try to do something and I'll say, oh, I'm just lazy, or I'm just a slob, or whatever it is. Maybe as I dig into that, underneath that is I can't. And then underneath that thought is, what if I fail? Underneath that thought is, I'm not good enough. And so you'll dig down and you'll find these beliefs that we hold about ourselves that come up in so many different contexts. And those are the ones that you're really going to target in CBT therapy.
I love that. I want to almost have you come back on to almost do a full session, full episode just on CBT therapy, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to.
How beneficial it could be, because we're kind of scratching it, but it seems like that's like one of the main ways, besides just changing that mentality, changing how you look at things, how you deal with things, that shadow self, the monkey brain or monkey mind. It is the CBT. It seems to be very very beneficial, and something that people should continue to talk to somebody about, and obviously a professional, if that's the realm you're going to go, to guide you through it. But I feel like to have a very good understanding about what it is, I mean, I feel better about it just kind of knowing what it is and how it makes your mind work, rather than what I thought it was even going into this podcast episode. So I think that'd be hugely important.
I think it's important for people to know that they have the capability, really, to kind of go on this journey on their own. I've heard multiple people saying you don't need to do anything, but the problem is that the mind doesn't understand that. The mind does make you believe you need to do something. And I'll tell you that when I first started dealing with all this anxiety and stuff, nobody could even really explain it besides these two idiots. And I started listening to podcasts, which I never done. I started going for walks, which I never done. I started, really slowing down and telling people no. So it's almost like social media has been telling these things for years, but nobody really knew what they meant. When people are like, oh, learn to tell people no, learn to slow down. Like you said, walk in the grass. Unfortunately, I can't. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic. There is a guy named Dan Nevins, who is an Army veteran. He's a double amputee below the knee as well. He was one of my mentors. And he is like one of these yogi masters. And he started doing this whole grounding technique by taking his prosthetics off, by taking his liners off, which is what you put on your nubs. And you truly get on the yoga mat on your knees and on your nubs, and talk about vulnerable. Like we are so like, I don't know, I don't want to use the word embarrassed, but becoming an amputee and then kind of getting your butt to the ground almost like a baby, or getting on your knees, that's like super vulnerable. And when my daughter was born, I remember telling people stories, and I always left out an extremely important part, because especially with new parents, all three of us know, especially as men, that we always try to make an excuse, that, oh, I can't because I'm working, or, oh, I'm doing this because that's not my job, or, oh, the woman has it easier. But we have to work hard. I don't want to say harder, but we have to work harder to connect with that child in different abilities. And I remember getting up in the middle of the night and crawling on my knees across the hallway, picking up my daughter, throwing over my shoulder, crawling back to the bedroom, putting her on the bed, and, giving it to her mom so she could feed it, burp it, and whatever else, And when I say it, obviously.
I was about to say, why do you say it? It just blows my mind.
The baby.
But what she remembers, or what she'll take away, is that you were there. That you showed up.
She does. She laughs because she takes my legs all the time, and she's like, "Oh, look, I'm daddy," and she'll get on her knees, and she'll, I don't think she's doing it maliciously, but I think it's funny because my daughter was able to see that vulnerable aspect of me that I don't really show anybody. Sometimes at work, when I tell people, "Hey, like, I'm sorry, I can't do that," that takes a lot for me to say I can't do something, because the last 13 years of being an amputee have been proving myself to people.
No, I agree. Because even in the academy, there's not one thing. And I remember we all said this too. There's people that sat out in activities we did when they were able to. Like, oh, I'm scared to do this. I'm scared of this. And they go, the guy with no fucking legs isn't scared to do this. And there was not one thing that you shied away from where you said, I don't want to do this run. My nubs hurt, or I have a sore, or I just don't want to do this, or I can't roll and get up this way. Sometimes when you watch, you're like, oh, that was a weird way to get up. But you're like, well, it makes sense because he's got no fucking legs to get up on. And the purpose of that is there's not one limit you set for yourself while doing it. And this is another one of them. You got up, crawled to the crib, crawled back with the baby. You still did your part. Where
you meant like the baby crib? I thought you were just trying to be ghetto, saying like the crib to the house. I got.
Yeah, we got to translate for Angel.
Yeah. You know, my mind goes into. You already know
Brooklyn.
It goes into Brooklyn real quick.
There's a lot of dads being, oh, it's not my job to feed the baby. It's not my job to get up at night.
If it's your baby, it's your job.
I agree, but there's a lot of people that would find the easy way to say, it's not for me. That's not it. And I applaud you for how you handle those things.
I know. I think that with this whole mental health thing, I want other amputees, I want other veterans, other police officers, because, we were talking about breaking that monkey mind down and letting people know, like, hey, it's not just because I'm a veteran. It's not because I'm a police officer. We're freaking people. Every single person is going to have this issue at some point in their life if they, God forbid, have something like that happen to them. And instead of me trying to be egotistical or too, like, oh, I'm not going to let nobody see that side of me. I'm pretty much hurting other people by not letting them know, hey, I do have bad days. Yes, my leg is cut up, so I cannot do that run right now, instead of going through with it because I am being egotistical. And then I hurt myself beyond repair, or now I'm out for a couple months. I think that's important for me to realize, and I need to be better at it. But letting other people know, like, hey, there are going to be bad days. We all have bad days. But like the last couple of weeks, I've had this really bad cut on my right leg, and I've just been walking on it, and it feels like someone just stabbed me with a knife, and I told Angel, I'm like, man, I can't roll right now. And that hurts me to say that because I love being on the mats, but I know that if I get on the mats.
How many times have I asked, I'm like, yo, is he going to come? Is he going to come?
He's been using this excuse for months.
I'm almost 3 months in. And
He's been using that excuse.
Hey, we're on a serious note right now. Okay.
Oh, okay.
We're on a serious note.
Sorry.
But once there
seems to be a disconnect over here.
At least once an episode, there's one.
I'm like, no, hold on, this is serious. We're talking about the cut, and now we got to slow it down. But I think it's important for all of us to be a little bit, vulnerable with other people. And I think that's what's happened. Because I was going to ask you earlier, but I think Chris pretty much hit it on the head, is why are we so different from our past generations? And it's because we continue to build that same platform. Like, okay, men don't cry. Men don't break down. Men don't ask for help. But until we break those walls down, then we're going to continue the same generational cycle.
That's not the case anymore. Men do cry. Men do break down. Men do become females. Men do.
I heard Angel tell me the other day, he goes, fuck that. He goes, there's MMA people breaking down crying.
Yeah.
Some guy. The Baddie's done it. Multiple interviews.
No, but that's
Volkanovski did it. Yeah. He talked about his mental health issues. Like,
Angel sounded like a Angel sounded like a legit podcaster earlier. He was like mentioning the first name, last name, date of birth, social security number. Yeah.
And again, it's because when we talk about mental health, there's still a negative stigma behind it, and people don't want to seem vulnerable, and they don't want to seem like they're weak. And then you have these professional MMA fighters that get paid to kill each other, like the modern day gladiators, and they're talking about their mental health struggles. So if they can do that, right, and then again, they're known to be one of the badasses of like the baddest people on the planet, and they're talking about their mental health and how they struggle in between fights, or how they struggle during the fight and how they struggle after the fight. And yet you have people like us, right? Like commoners, I would say. That
common folk.
Everyday people, right? That don't want to talk about it. That we don't want to seem weak.
Common folk.
I'm just saying, right? Like we don't want to talk about it. And I'm not saying we, because we have a whole podcast talking about mental health. I'm talking about obviously other people that don't want to seem weak. It wasn't that funny, bro.
Angel, no. In the back of my mind, all I can think of Angel's trying to progress his vocabulary.
Angel's like in a pilgrim hat running around, just commenting. I'm like, this is awesome.
Earlier, Angel said, my vocabulary's going backwards, and now he's trying to fucking make up for it by commoners.
You think that's a big word?
No, I think it's funny.
That is a common word. As common as commoners.
As common as you can get. Wow, this is the first time we went off track this whole episode. We're towards the end. That's not bad. We did pretty well.
This is pretty good. We were pretty serious. Well, because we had a professional here, so we had to step up. But look, I'm not saying
I didn't know how we were going to behave, to be honest. I'm pretty proud of us.
I'm proud of us. There we go. I'm proud of us. I'm not going to say never, because never is not a good word, they say, but there's a lot of people that should be hearing this part of the podcast, from a professional aspect, from Hillary, and also from these three idiots, by at least saying the people who are in front of the camera, actors, athletes, people that are always on the platform, they need to be the ones speaking up. Because what the problem is, like, we look up to them. Children look up to them. My daughter doesn't want to be like her mom. My daughter wants to be like one of these, Kylie Jenner and Kardashians and the makeup artists and stuff. And you know what? They're the ones who are using a lot of these things, like the makeup, like the social media, like the Instagram post that they look happy, but they're not really happy.
My son wants to be a dinosaur.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. T-Rex. I think we all wanted to be T-Rex at one point, right? Didn't we all walk around like this?
Never lose your dinosaur.
Yeah.
So I love having that professional, perspective, but it would be an incredible thing to see if there were people, which I've seen it lately, and I always post it on my social media, like Jim Carrey, that video I posted the other day. He was like, ooh, I could build a ladder to the end of the world with the things that I've gone through in my life. And we talk about that secondary trauma. I used to look at those videos where people say, or Robin Williams would say, you have to be careful with the people faking happiness. People don't fake sadness, they fake happiness or whatever, or backwards. I definitely fucked that up. But it's so important, it's definitely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and in the meantime, because I'd love to have, obviously these conversations, and for people to get rid of all the stigmas, but we can't control what other people do or the Kardashians post, but we can control what we're showing our kids, and they're watching. All of the generations are watching, just like you guys have been talking about this whole time, right? Generational trauma. So they are picking up and learning these things, and so we can become more aware of our behaviors and our mannerisms and our patterns to be able to set a better example for those little ears that are listening and watching. And the other thing that I thought maybe I think Chris had said something earlier too about it being uncomfortable to go to sessions, and hearing all of your vulnerabilities and challenges. Choose your discomfort. It's hard to exist in this world. It's hard to exist with anxiety, depression, trauma, vulnerabilities. It's also hard to talk about those things. So choose your heart. Do you choose holding it in, keeping it to yourself, and not having any place to open that shaken soda bottle, or do you choose the hardness of vulnerability and opening up and seeing where that journey takes you? It's all hard. It's all difficult.
I was gonna basically ask you what advice you would give, and it must be a family thing. You just absolutely took the thought out of my head, and all three of us sitting here nodding, like, Liz first, like, oh my God.
It's in quotes.
Choose your
we
heart.
actually wrote a quote right now.
It's in the notes.
You just said.
You literally just discomfort. I think it would probably be the title of this podcast episode, but I think it's one of the biggest things you can take out of it is
at the very end, man, she came through with the freaking grand slam.
My God.
Jesus Christ.
I don't even have a big positive roll around off that. I think what you did, there's nothing else to say.
Well, we try to end on a high note.
No, that's
right?
what I mean.
And
she did it. So choosing your discomfort, right? And I think that will sit with a lot of police, a lot of veterans, a lot of fathers, a lot of parents, really a lot of people in general, because when you look at it and go, well, this is hard. Well, okay, so do I want this to be hard, or do I want to take the steps
so it's not changing
that is hard, but to make me happier in the long run? And I think this episode has given so many keys to success for anybody who's dealing with anything mental health related, where they could truly look at themselves and understand better what they're feeling, whether it's mentally or physically, from what we talked about earlier, the physical aspects you can deal with, all the way to changing ones, we've talked about before, but changing your mindset and understanding what that other thing, whether it's your dog, like Poppy Seed, or your kid, why they're acting the way they are versus going off of your own emotions to change how you react, which goes with that cognitive theory, and changing that monkey mind and that understanding your shadow self. I think you've given a lot of people, and you've given us the keys to be able to turn around for tomorrow and make tomorrow a better day than today. And we want to thank you for all the insights you've given us. We want to thank you for opening up and talking to us, giving us essentially a brief free therapy session.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll take free.
For anybody who is after this episode saying, oh, I still don't know. If you're in that, I don't know, take the step.
Yeah.
Take the step, because even if you're wrong, okay, I don't want it. You took the step, and maybe later on in life when you do need it, you've already taken that step. You've already broken that mold, and it's going to be that much easier for you to now enter that room of therapy or enter that room of talking about it. And when you do so, I can tell you from my own experience, and I think the other two here, as well as professional Dr. Hillary Hayen, would be able to agree.
Dr.
It makes a
Hayen.
world of a difference.
I look at you like saying Dr. Hayen, and I'm like, not you, buddy.
Not me. So here we do want one more thing
Not
from
you,
you,
bud.
and I know we didn't ask you this. We want you to leave us a joke.
If you have one.
If you got one.
Like a dad joke, mom joke, whatever you want to call them. Anything.
A doctor joke.
A doctor joke. Even if it's dark humor, we love dark humor.
Yeah.
Oh, can't do that. I'll tell the most classic psych joke that's ever been told.
Go for it.
Oh, I want to hear it.
How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb?
Ooh.
I feel like this is a trick question.
And this is a trick question, but I'm going to go with 10.
1, but the light bulb has to want to change. There you go. That's the one that goes around.
Yeah, we're keeping that.
That was good. That was good.
Hillary, thank you so much. Thank you for your insight.
Course.
I love you. We love you.
Yeah, love you guys. So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. And this has been really fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Till the next time.
Yeah. Yay. Bye.